Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues who have joined to the 16th edition of the webinar series on good governance practices and policies webinar series. We have the honor and a pleasure to host Professor Suma Athreye, ma'am, from IIT Delhi. Before I begin, I request our Director General, Dr. Surendra Kumar Bagre, sir, to just give a welcome note.
उसको सतीश को बुलाना. Professor Suma Athreye, Himanshi, and all those participants who have joined today's webinar on public policy and good governance. I am indeed very happy that Professor Suma Athreye could join this, could address us on this occasion. Her talk is on, this public policy and product innovation in markets with socially motivated firms. I think the topic is very product innovation in markets with socially motivated firms. I think the topic is very interesting, and I'm happy that she could take time out for this webinar series. I would also request Himanshi to introduce her to the audience. I must also mention that till recently she was heading School of Public Policy at IIT Delhi, and she has worked elsewhere also in other places, which Himanshi will cover. But while in IIT Delhi, she has tried to expand the School of Public Policy there and give a new focus. And I am happy that NCGG had long collaboration with School of Public Policy, and especially with Professor Suma Athreye. She has been very kind and helpful to us in building our team of researchers at NCGG. And without her commitment and time, I think would not have been able to get the candidates which we got working with us. Thank you, Professor Suma Athreye. And it's indeed a pleasure to welcome. I think I was just wondering why it didn't occur to me to invite you on for webinar earlier. But like when you become too familiar, you tend to forget. So I think that's what happened. But Himanshi was kind enough to remind, no, I think we need a good speaker, and that's how we have invited you. So Himanshi, anything more you want to add? Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I will take a minute to introduce ma'am to our audience. So we have Professor Suma Athreye, ma'am. She is a professor at School of Public Policy at IIT Delhi. Previously, she was associated with University of Essex. She holds a DPhil in Science and Technology Policy from Science Policy Research Unit, University of Sussex. Ma'am's research interest includes economics, management of intellectual property, finance of R&D, pharmaceutical capabilities in emerging markets, measuring the impacts of inclusive innovation, open innovation, and technology license. She has published over 60 papers on these subjects and has won several research grants for the work in these areas. Professor, she has also done editor work for Journal of International Business Policy and serves on editorial board of other academic journals. We welcome you, ma'am. Without further ado, I welcome you for your talk on the topic product innovation in markets with socially motivated firms.
Oh, thank you for those kind words from both Dr. Bagre and you, Himanshi. So it has been a pleasure for me to work with NCGG and shape how it has grown as an organization. I can recognize many names in the audience whom I have interviewed as part of the selection panel. So I'm very happy to see them and also some of my former students here. The paper that I wish to present today is something that I started working on when I joined IIT in 2022. I worked on it with a colleague from economics, Professor Abhijit Banerjee. And we also pulled in a long-time co-author from Birkbeck College, Sandeep Kapoor. So this is my first, though I'm almost at the sunset of my career, that this is my first theory paper. And it has been a great joy to work with two theorists. So they are bona fide economists and theorists. Sandeep I worked with for a very long time because we studied together in India, and we've somehow worked together since we were young professional colleagues. But it was also a real joy to work with Abhijit and learn more about, when you work with a co-author, you also learn about how they think about things. So I want to register my debt to both my co-authors before I begin the presentation, because though there was an idea, the shape it finally took depended so much on their inputs. And also the presentation today has been partly done by Abhijit. So I am really indebted to these authors and to the ecosystem of IIT, which allowed me the time to, work on this issue. So without further ado, let me just dive into the presentation. So I need to start sharing, which I was able to do just a minute ago. So let me see. Share. Okay, here we are. So the title of the paper has changed a little bit, but initially we just called it socially motivated innovation. And the central question that we try to address in this, and you've seen my co-authors there, the central question that I try to address in this paper, we try to address, is that when innovators care about social benefit, do they improve welfare at the cost of weaker innovation incentives? So this question is important for us to understand when we're interested in innovation outcomes, but even more for thinking about policy and institutional design, because if the answer to this question is yes, then the question is, what can policy do about it? And what sorts of institutional design do we require? So that is the central question. And why do we care about this question? Not sure why the slide is not moving. Oh dear. Yeah, here it is. You have to click it. Okay, so the starting point is our observation that some innovators are not actually straightforward profit maximizers. A lot of the theory, especially the economics of innovation policy, is contingent on this assumption that firms are self-seeking. So they are innovating because they are looking for a profit and the temporary monopoly that innovation can give them. But this is not always true, and there are several examples of this. Should I stop? No.
No, ma'am.
So there are many examples. If you think about the history of science and technology, the sequence of the DNA, which is due to Crick and Watson, was not ever patented or profited from directly by the innovators. So they refused to patent it and they refused to make a profit from it. Similarly, the internet and the World Wide Web was the brainchild of Berners-Lee, and he never sought to profit from it. And of course, there's a whole line of university research which is motivated by social impact rather than by private profit. More recently, we have some examples, that you might recognize. There is the case of the COVID vaccine, where the Oxford-AstraZeneca collaboration basically said that they wanted to have broad access to the vaccine at cost commitments, and that it mattered for them both politically and ethically. Yet clinical trials, scale-up, manufacturing still required some strong financial incentives and supports. And this was exactly the sort of setting in which grants, procurement, or what we call more broadly as innovation prizes could matter. So that's a recent case. I think most of the audience seem very young. They may actually recognize this because it happened during their growing up years. Another example which I'd like to mention just because it's so interesting and still evolving is the case of the OpenAI. OpenAI began as a non-profit organization with a non-profit mission. But very shortly after ChatGPT was released and it became a success, it moved towards a more hybrid structure to attract the scale of finance needed in order to refine the product more. And that trajectory captures the paper's core idea that social mission and technological ambition, technological ambition requires a commitment of resources, can actually pull in very different directions. So the relevant policy question is not only how to regulate, but how to sustain socially valuable innovation. So I think this is the deeper point that we want to make, which is that sometimes social innovation happens in areas which governments want to support. You know, we want to support a cure for malaria. We want to support, a policymaker wants to support a cheap drug that can cure many diseases. A policymaker may want to support that environmental innovation that is capable of widespread adoption. But how do you sustain such a socially valuable innovation, in the market? So this is the question that we are trying to grapple with. And as I present, it will become more clear to you how these questions are all related. So let me go to the motivation for the paper. We already started with the examples, and I hope now it's okay to assume that some innovators are not stranded profit maximizers. I mentioned the COVID vaccine, I mentioned OpenAI, but what are the kind of organizations that would qualify? Universities, public sector laboratories, NGOs, philanthropic ventures, and public benefit corporations may all care about access and social impact, but they may not be immune to the need for profit, at least partly because you may want to, have better machines in your lab. You may want to refine the product a bit more, and so on. That usually the social motivation may mean more accessible pricing, which can raise welfare for any given market structure. So whether I'm a monopolist or whether I'm a oligopolist or operating in a competitive market, to have the social motivation means that I might end up selling my product at a lower cost, which is of course going to be better for social welfare, whatever the market structure I'm in. But lower profitability can also weaken ex ante R&D. What do I mean by this? So if my technological outcomes still require R&D effort, by giving away my product at a low price now, I might be compromising the money that I have for future R&D. So it weakens the ex ante R&D incentives, and for other people who want to enter the space, it can weaken the incentives to enter, and therefore tilt outcomes towards monopoly or even foregone innovation. I want you to think about products like the Tata Nano car, which were actually produced with a kind of social impact in mind. I think Ratan Tata's idea was that instead of bullock carts, we'd have the Tata Nano displacing or replacing the transport in rural communities. But actually, though there was a lot of interest in this area, in fact, no firm introduced a people's car at that price point or for that purpose. And I think our theoretical model sort of helps to predict something like that. So this was a foregone innovation. It was introduced, but it didn't succeed in its original intent. And the BOP market is full of such innovations. BOP stands for bottom of pyramid market. And the reason that they do not go very far is because either the market won't sustain, or the product service that's required to maintain market share in those market segments is prohibitively high, And firms cannot afford to sustain that innovation because they don't have the money to set up those support centers. So pro-social behavior can create a policy problem. It is not just a moral success story. So the failure of a pro-social product will deter other people from providing that product. So that space is not really fully occupied. And that is the policy problem, that you might actually deter entry in that product space at all. So it's a foregone innovation rather than an innovation that failed in many cases. So in a snapshot, we will have access today due to lower prices, broader reach, and higher customer benefit. But we may have access today at the cost of innovation tomorrow, possibly because of lower profits, weaker R&D, and less imitative entry. So because it's a policy audience, I will spare you the technical details, but happy to share the paper with anybody who wants to read it. But basically, this is a game theoretic model, and the picture, we are trying to summarize it in this picture. So the first stage is that firms choose a certain level of R&D intensity. Based on this R&D intensity, they are successful or fail, or they fail to realize an innovation. So this is a probabilistic outcome. And depending on whether there's success or failure for the innovation, market structure is determined in stage 2. So the market structure depends on how many people succeed in that innovation. And if only one person succeeds, it's a monopoly. If 2 firms succeed, then you have a duopoly. And of course, if more than 2 firms succeed, you have an oligopoly, and so on. So the possible outcomes are, for simplicity, we are considering 2 firms, but the possible outcomes are that both innovate successfully, in which case you have a duopoly. Only one innovates, so you have a monopoly, and neither innovates because the price at which you want to sell is kind of closing out that kind of innovation. And that is a case of foregone innovation. So the key parameters we're interested in this model is the probability that R&D succeeds at firm I, and that is given by phi, which is a function of Ri. Ri is the R&D intensity. And the objective function, so we have a firm that's profit motivated, like a standard firm, but we also have the socially motivated firm, which cares about the producer surplus, which is profit, but is willing to sacrifice, but it also cares about how much consumer surplus. So theta can go from 0 to 1. If theta is 0, it only cares about its own profit. If theta is 1, then it wants to give all the consumer surplus back. But this can only happen at the cost of some profits being sacrificed. So that's the setup of our model. And the key modeling choices is between these 2 firms and their different objective functions. The standard benchmark firm is purely profit focused in the product market. It faces the socially motivated firm in the same innovation race. Its R&D incentives depend on whether it expects monopoly or duopoly profits. And this is why the market structure becomes endogenous. On the other hand, you have the socially motivated firm who values consumer surplus as well as profit. And the parameter theta measures the weight it places on the consumer surplus. If it places no weight, that is theta is 0, then of course it becomes like the profit maximizing firm. It sets a lower post-innovation price than a standard profit maximizer because of the theta CSI, the weight it gives to the consumer surplus, but chooses R&D based on expected financial return. So in this last bit, how it chooses its R&D, it's just like a standard profit maximizing firm. So it would like to have the R&D which will give it the best financial return. So theta lowers price directly and profits indirectly. There's someone's mixer or grinder or something that is giving a lot of disturbance here. So I request this person to mute their to mute themselves because can everybody hear?
Yes, ma'am.
We'll
just see, ma'am.
If you can mute all the other participants, then we won't have.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the so instead of showing you like mathematical solutions, we are going to use simulations to make the points that we want. So we have the monopoly benchmark, which is the first one, and you can see that the as theta rises, the price level, monopoly price falls, and output rises. And so the blue line is the price line, the orange line is the profit line, and the green line is the welfare. So we're just measuring the level of it in whatever units you want. But the key result here is that as theta increases, prices fall, outputs rise, and therefore welfare rises, but profits also fall. Okay, because R&D is assumed to depend on expected financial returns. So innovation incentives weaken. So this is the basic trade-off in the paper in the purest form. This monopoly could be, so now the next one is if there's a duopoly. So you have two firms, one is profit focused and the other is socially motivated, then we find that for some levels of theta, actually there's not much difference. And it's only when theta is greater than 0.6 that we start to observe the divergence between price, profits, and we see also this increasing social welfare, which is the green line. So it's also worth noting that the level of duopoly welfare is higher than the level of profit welfare, monopoly welfare. So I'm just going to return to the, I'm just going to return to the, I can't seem to go back. Yeah. So this is the monopoly benchmark. You can see that the highest welfare is at 25 units. But in the duopoly model, because you have two firms, you have a much higher welfare at close to 30 units. So even with no profit maximization in duopoly, the welfare is higher. And I hope the reason for that is clear because duopoly prices are lower than monopoly prices. So here in the duopoly, you can see that the social motivated firm, which is the blue line, is going to have a line that its prices are and profits are lower than that of the profit focused firm. Welfare rises in duopoly with greater social motivation. At low theta, the socially motivated firm may even earn slightly more than its rival because its lower price is offset by a higher market share. So at low theta, actually nothing, socially motivated firm may be better, but at higher levels of theta, the profits of the profit-focused firm are higher. Now we went, so these results are only conditional on an existing market structure, but the next step is to endogenize the market structure. So you say that, okay, if this is a situation, what type of market structure will actually prevail? And that depends on who actually makes it to the market. So private innovation incentives, firms choose R&D before knowing that they will face a rival or not. Expected profit depends on the rival's profitability of success. So this is the standard duopoly. Research intensities therefore become strategic substitutes. So you could have the socially motivated firm with a higher research intensity actually substituting for the private firm. So there are three possible outcomes. There could be a duopoly, there could be a monopoly, or no innovation. Even if social motivation improves welfare for any given market structure, in stage 2, it may also reduce the profitability of socially valuable entry. So the main welfare comparison has to be made across market structures as much as post-entry prices. So this is a little twist of the paper. So what is the central trade-off? The trade-off is that the expected welfare under private incentives, which is shown by the blue line, drops sharply after theta crosses 0.6. But the expected welfare at the welfare optimum increases with the higher social motivation. So the policy makers' problem is this increasing gap and how to fix it. So for any fixed market structure, more social motivation increases welfare. But when the market structure itself depends on innovation incentives, very high social motivation can become self-defeating. The socially motivated firm's R&D can then collapse and the market tilts towards a profit-focused monopoly or foregone innovation. This is what the policymaker would want to avoid, and hence the problem, how to preserve that access benefit without killing the innovation benefit. So moderate theta is helpful, but high theta can hurt. So here is a classic economics of innovation policy problem, that private R&D and welfare optimal R&D diverge. But they diverge here because of social motivation. So the green line is the welfare optimal for the social firm, welfare optimal R&D for the socially motivated firm. The red line indicates the welfare optimum R&D for the private profit motivated firm. So both of them diverge from the optimal R&D, the private R&D that firms are making. But you can see that it diverges less for the private firm than it does for the social firm. So the blue line and the green line are further apart than the orange line and the red line. So the socially motivated firm underinvests relative to the welfare benchmark. The profit-focused rival can over-respond when the socially motivated firm retreats. That's why you have, at some point, the orange line is above the red line, because they can calculate now that monopoly is more likely, and planner would like more innovation from the social innovator and maybe a less aggressive race for monopoly behavior from the rival firm. So this is what the planner, policy planner is trying to balance. And of course, we are assuming everybody has all the information, which might be a heroic assumption. But this is a logical kind of exercise where you say, okay, if there are two such firms, what can the policymaker expect? So what the policymaker can expect is a big gap between the optimal R&D spending from the socially motivated firm and perhaps aggressive overspending in R&D from the privately focused, profit-focused firm in the hope of reaching a monopoly. So the welfare-minded planner has three possible outcomes. So the best outcome is a competitive duopoly. You have two successful innovators, you have more output, lower prices, and this is the highest expected welfare in our model. The second best is a monopoly by the socially motivated firm. So if I am going to kill a firm off, then I think the better firm to go is probably the profit-oriented firm, because the socially oriented firm is going to distribute some of its profits as lower prices. And the worst is to have a profit-focused monopoly or no innovation, because this is really harmful for the welfare in the economy. These are standard micro results, but just in the context of our model. So what can the policymaker do? So the problem of the policymaker is lower profits, weaker R&D, and the wrong market structure. And it has two instruments which it can use to correct this. The first instrument is innovation prizes. So it can say, well, here's the problem, I pay for success, and I thus bridge the private and social return. A second instrument it can have is R&D tax credit. So this supports the effort ex ante and can be calibrated, but asymmetrically. I'll come to this in a minute. So the policy roadmap is for the policymaker to ask which instrument is cheaper to implement in any given situation. So that's the instrument I'll support, because we assume there's a fiscal constraint. So the first lever is innovation prizes. You reward successful innovation once the innovation outcome is known, but the required prizes may differ by market structure. Okay. What should be paid in a duopoly will not be the same as what should be paid in a monopoly. That is easy to see. I don't think we need to show that. But the socially it's also needs to differ by type of firm. So the socially motivated firm, because of that bigger gap between optimal R&D and actual R&D, the socially motivated firm generally deserves larger prizes because welfare benefits exceed its private return by a larger amount. So in our simulations, you can see this, that as theta increases, the duopoly price to the social firm must be larger than the duopoly price to the private firm. So when, of course, both firms are profit focused, you can have a level playing field and you can give the same price. But as they start to differ in their social motivation, then the firm that is more socially motivated needs a bigger price to compensate for the difference between what it can achieve in terms of R&D through its own profit effort and what is needed to ensure the best welfare for a society, which depends on the lower price. So intuitively, prices are filling the gap between the private producer surplus and the broader social return. And that is why we want the price support to be asymmetric and favoring the socially motivated firm. The second policy lever is tax credits for R&D. So tax credits for R&D again subsidize research effort directly before success is realized. Prizes can be paid after success is realized, but tax credits are usually before the success is realized. Again, you want a asymmetric support. A socially motivated firm typically deserves more help because its private incentives are muted because of the weight that it puts on the consumer surplus. This is especially intuitive when the policy concern is to preserve the presence of the socially motivated firm. Okay, so, and again, these are what our simulations show us at different levels of social motivation. So, which instrument is fiscally cheaper? In the paper, there is a cutoff rule, and the instrument choice rule is that if the welfare optimal R&D target is relatively low, you need very little further R&D to improve the product. Tax credits are cheaper. But if the target is high, like was the case in the COVID vaccine, when the technology was very early stage and much more R&D was needed to make sure that the vaccine is safe, or currently the situation with AI, and much more investment is needed to ensure the safety of the technology, then prices are cheaper because you want to see the outcome and you can give whatever was spent as R&D. So the underlying intuition is simple. Tax credits are paid on effort with certainty, while prices are paid only if innovation succeeds. So when the socially desired target is high, it can be cheaper to pay conditional on success. At an exact cutoff, the mix of the two instruments is cost equivalent. This is the theoretical result. Interpretation is that it is a useful policy result because it says not merely what support should be offered, but how it should be offered. The right choice depends on how much R&D the planner wants to induce. So the planner wants to induce a large R&D because there's an important social problem, give a prize. So this is what happened historically with the longitude prize, which is very well known in history. So, and also what happened with COVID, basically government structured contracts, which said that if you are successful, we will meet all the costs of your clinical trials and we will buy so many units of your vaccine from you. Okay. So the right choice really depends on how much R&D the planner wants to induce. So the takeaways of our paper for policy are that social motivation changes pricing and access, and therefore market structure becomes endogenous and can sometimes be less favorable. And policy must be asymmetric and instrument sensitive in order to preserve the success of these socially motivated firms. So innovation prizes and tax credits should be calibrated to the social return gap and sometimes targeted more strongly to socially motivated actors. The bottom line is that socially motivated innovation is valuable, but it is not self-sustaining under standard market incentives. So if you want it to be self-sustaining, then policy has to intervene in order to support it. I'll stop the presentation here. I have some backup slides with the theory, but I don't think we need to see them. Let me stop here and take questions, and hopefully we can have a nice discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I invite the audience that they may either switch on their mic and ask a question, or if they want to type a question in the chat box, that's also an option.
Oh, there is something in the chat box already.
That's regarding Hindi, the presentation payment.
I see. My Hindi is not up to, I mean, I can speak Hindi well, but I don't know if I can present in Hindi.
We have a couple of our consultants who have also joined. They are also in the area of public policy and economics.
I hope I tried to simplify it, but I hope it was not excessively economic.
Yes, ma'am. It was really, interesting to see this kind of work. We're just waiting for them to ask, because I assume that they would want to talk. Yeah.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Pavan Panera from IIT. Having a basically want you need to if you just think of at this point, government is promoting a lot of is in various sectors. We are feeling that there is a need for the India, specifically if I talk about telecom sector. Because we were importing a lot of telecom instruments and everything from outside India, and now the next war is for the whether India can lead 6G or further onwards. So that war in which we are in with the so promoting government has put a lot of efforts to set up R&D funds, as well as those funds has been given to promote R&D and asking people to come forward. But my recent interactions with all the industry as well as academicians, including IIT Delhi, I should say, that whatsoever innovation, whatsoever things they are coming up, those ideas or those things are not as per what we need to be a cutting edge technology, which can come out from there. So how, because the support, as you said, there may be an upfront model that you start giving funding at the beginning, or they may be after something is successful. We tried both in both of the cases. It's not getting. What else can be, which can make it a really workable model for them?
Okay, so the traditional way in which most governments, and I'm now looking over my shoulder at China to take some examples, traditional way in which governments have dealt with this issue is by the setting up of public sector firms, where you can guide the social motivation, right? You can specify what is needed, and basically, I think where we went wrong in our country was that the prize was not given at the end, right? So there was a kind of complacence which crept in. But China has done that with its public sector organizations. They are given a specification, they support them with finance, whatever they need. And then, something comes out. So this model which I have set out today assumes that there is a socially motivated firm. Is there a socially motivated firm in telecom?
Yeah, there are a lot of socially motivated. That's what I'm saying. The government is open even this time, not only for the academic institutions. It is open to the number of startups, even the short private firms only, that they can come forward and come up with the technology which can be utilized for India. It's not only social, it will not only benefit the social cause, it will be giving a commercial upfront to the nation. How then, what can be made onto it?
So the socially motivated firm has to be willing to share its technology at a cost which is not a profit maximizing price. That's our definition. That's how we identify the socially motivated firm. A public sector firm can do that, right? But just expecting a university to do that is hard because universities don't manufacture things. They can maybe give a prototype or something for a low royalty, but who's going to produce it? So I think it's a deeper problem. And what I can understand is that if there are no private players coming forward, then such a firm which is motivated in that way doesn't exist, and the government may need to set up one. So that's my short answer to you.
Okay, thank you.
There was something in the
Yes,
chat.
Yes, two of this.
Ma'am, there's a question by Arup. I'll read it out. So the question is, your model argues that social motivation can improve welfare, but also reduce innovation incentives. Could you explain the economic mechanism behind this trade-off? Specifically, why does higher social motivation sometimes lead to lower R&D investment and even push the market towards monopoly and no innovation outcomes?
Okay, and there's one more question on the model. Okay, that's a different question. Okay, so the mechanism is the following, that in order to improve the technology or for future innovation, you still need R&D, and R&D comes from profits. So a socially motivated firm is already sacrificing its profits because it values consumer surplus. So, I mean, the assumption here is that, when do you get higher consumer surplus? You get higher consumer surplus when there's a lower price. So it's already sacrificing profits because it wants that lower price. I mean, that's a simple way to think about it, though the way that we've defined it is a bit more nuanced. So the mechanism is simply this, that they will run out of money to do that R&D. And once they run out, but their R&D decision depends on that calculation. That I will undertake R&D if I'll make a profit from this product, even if I sell it at a lower price. Okay, so that is the mechanism by which the R&D effort is affected. Now, that is just for a single firm. But if we think about a market where there are two players, then what player one does affects player two. So if you recall the whole COVID vaccine story, when AstraZeneca made the claim that they were going to sell the vaccine for the price of a cup of coffee, everybody had to drop their price. And there are now, accounts of what Moderna did, what BioNTech did. There are books written about it. And it's very clear that they could not sell to any government with a higher price, because everyone was saying, if Oxford is going to give me this vaccine at the price of a coffee, why should I pay you $50 for it? But $50 was their true cost. So they had estimated that with $50, they would actually cover the costs of their R&D. And they were unable to demand this price, right? Because there was a price floor set in the market because of the action of the socially motivated firm, in this case, AstraZeneca Oxford. So as they declared a lower price, nobody else could really offer a much higher price, unless there was some kind of reason for doing so. And of course, anti-vaxxers found many reasons for this. And that's another story, which I don't really want to get into. But that is the second mechanism, okay? The first mechanism is the direct effect on the firm's own profit. The second is what happens in the industry. In the industry, even even a profit-focused player cannot now make profits because there's a downward pressure on the price. So some may calculate like this is like not a good market to enter. So if you remember when the COVID vaccine actually has many things which support this, which are borne out by this model. So there were about 187 candidate vaccines, right? Some of them were on advanced clinical trial stages, some were less advanced. But basically after 5 vaccines were approved, all the others dropped out of the game. They said, okay, we are not going to enter this market because we don't think they didn't see much point in entering the market. So that it speaks to the lower profitability for other people to enter. So I hope this clarifies why it will push the market toward monopoly or no innovation outcome. Because very few people, even today, if you think about the COVID vaccine, we think only about these 3 players, right? We don't really remember that Johnson & Johnson also got an approval, or Merck also had a vaccine, because they basically dropped out of the market. They did the clinical trials, but couldn't find a profitable way to sell. So they decided to go for other things. So they said, okay, we are going to supply the proteins, we are going to supply parts of some of the ingredients, you know. So I hope that answers your question, Arup. I've tried my best, but I'm happy to come back if you have more. Himja, the model says that larger innovation prizes and higher R&D taxes for socially motivated firms, but policy makers can't. This is a very good question. How can such asymmetric support be designed without encouraging firms to misrepresent their social objectives? You're very right. The way that I thought, if you're going to look for firms, we are assuming that social motivation somehow in the firm's DNA, right? We also don't expect this motivation to change over time. So we assume that a firm enters the market socially motivated and stays. This is, of course, you might say, well, is this a reasonable assumption or not? And those concerns are valid. But one way the government can track it is through firms' own declared mission statements and their actions in support of it. Firms do every year publish an annual report which says what are their objectives, and there are shared values which board of governors and stakeholders want to see. Like, for example, many firms have the mission that they want to be carbon neutral. That is a social motivation, and they have actions that can show us whether they are carbon neutral or not. So that is one way to track it. Another way is to, if there is no such firm, to set up a firm with that kind of mission, which is what public sector organizations historically have done. And that's what China has done with its public sector. So it has given it a social motivation and said, well, this is what you have to do. So those are the 2 ways that I can think. But you're right in your concern. We need better measures of social motivation. Could an alternative solution be to allow innovators the freedom to pursue while the government provides subsidies to keep the product affordable and accessible? Well, that is a kind of prize, isn't it? I mean, of course, all universities have the freedom to pursue any R&D strategy they want. That has not led to better products for consumers because there are lots of translational issues and so on. By tying the price to a market outcome, the government avoids this issue. So if it provides subsidies indefinitely, so in the way that we think of policy options, we think of either subsidies or prizes. So a subsidy is lowering the cost curve, whereas a prize is saying that based on the demand, I will give you whatever it is needed. So if you pursue both at the same time, I don't know if that's really helpful, because then you have to have a infinite budget. So I wouldn't do that. Question 2, the model appears to focus on the supplies. No, that's a misunderstanding. Demand side constraints do matter. Of course, we have not modeled it separately, like what is the elasticity of the demand curve and so on. But we do have a demand side to the model. Otherwise, you couldn't construct a price. I'm just going through all the questions in the chat before I turn to the raised hands. Your model assumes the presence of socially motivated firms. I want to understand, can the model help us understand what and how can no, we cannot do this because we are assuming that the firms start with a particular objective function that doesn't change. We do not have this possibility of switching. And also that would be a little bit counterproductive because a firm may start out saying it's socially, this is what happened to OpenAI actually. It started off saying it's socially motivated, and then it tried to become profit oriented, and as a consequence lost a lot of its staff and I think market, right? So that will make it very inconsistent in a model. In reality, whether firms start to, find a way to lower prices for broader access is something that is an open question based on the firm's cost and profits. A socially motivated firm upfront has this objective. So it is looking for profitability at a much lower price than the profit-oriented firm. Okay, and it's looking for profitability only because it wants to do R&D. How would efficiency be rewarded in this model? We are looking at innovation outcomes rather than efficiency. One is efficient, not socially, but that's a different model. You'd have to sit down and work it out. But this is not what this last question, how would efficiency be rewarded in this model? Supposing there are two competing firms, one is efficient, not socially motivated, others less efficient, but socially motivated. Which firm would the model favor? This is a different model. And this is what actually, a precursor to this kind of mixed objective modeling were firms that tried to look at the public sector versus the private sector. And in fact, what you have reproduced there is that kind of a problem statement, that if a public sector firm, which is more socially focused, but because of various reasons is less efficient, operates in the same model as a private sector firm, which is efficient, which should the government favor? So that is that kind of a I don't have any answer to that, but all I can say is it's a different kind of model. Okay, so now I can go to the raised hands. Dr. S.K. Pachauri.
Ma'am, I want to know what were the CSR initiatives that you have taken or proposed to take in the near future. If there is any material you can shed light on this subject. And
So,
also, secondly, what are you doing about promoting the growth of self-help groups, women's self-help groups particularly, since you're dealing with NGOs? This is a very important component of the program. And also, in keeping with your Viksit Bharat program for the next 2 or 3 decades to come.
Okay, so CSR initiatives are not often focused on innovation outcomes, and we are really only looking at product innovation markets. So I think our model doesn't apply to those situations where there is no R&D and there is no innovation, because there's no trade-off then. The same for women's self-help groups or cooperatives and so on. They are, of course, important, but they are not involved in R&D and innovation in the way that we have tried to model in our paper. So I would say that we have nothing to say for those groups.
But what I was trying to say is that government is spending a lot of money on this particular aspect of self-help groups, and it's promoting it in a very, very big way. and a lot of advertisements coming out in the newspapers. That's where I get my information from. I'm not a field worker, but what we read in the newspapers, what we see government promotional advertisements, I'm talking from there, not from any other personal knowledge. But otherwise, I do know that self-help groups play a very important role in women empowerment, particularly, which the government is emphasizing. That's all that I wanted to say.
That's very true. You're right. But our model has very little to say about these issues because they are not typically involved in innovation efforts. So, every model is restrictive. We look at certain phenomena and exclude some. In the case of our model, we are only looking at those phenomena that have an R&D component. And you will agree that neither of those two situations has. Where they have, then we can consider it under the ambit of this model, depending on who else is there in that sector.
Okay.
So that's my answer to your query.
I believe there are no questions, ma'am, left. So I would request our Director General, Dr. Surendra Kumar Bagre, sir, please give a concluding notes.
Sumaji, that your paper has generated a lot of questions, and I think it might be sometime worthwhile for our scholars in NCGG to read the paper and then have a separate discussion with you, because I think reading paper, understanding will take a lot of time. I will also try to do that. So please share your paper with me, and I think that will be very good for all our participants to hear from the author. It's a rare opportunity that you get to interact with the author of the paper and understand how step by step the paper has developed. So I will urge all scholars in NCGG and other participants that this is a great opportunity for researcher to understand how the paper is developed, and she has immense experience in the field. So I think that's one point I would like to emphasize, and I'm happy that it has generated really good interaction. I'm going to read the paper, and once again, I think thank you very much for taking time out. It's a very interesting paper plus topic, in the sense like you would like a firm to be socially committed, but then what happens to the innovation and how to support that. You mentioned the example of OpenAI, yes, and that actually created a lot of a lot of issues in terms of CO fired, not fired, then company putting capital, then withdrawing, then going to the court, this, that. So I think, yes. And the complexity of innovation in hyper competitive sectors where capital investment required might be very high. I think that's another area where I think we can see how the model addresses those issues, but that will be also worth thinking about by our scholars and others. So I think that in all, I would say it generated a lot of interest, and I'm happy that we could organize the webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity because though the model has been developed for some time, I'm working on the policy implications. So some of the questions have been very helpful, especially the one about how would you identify such firms. I think this needs more thought. And any other that, I like Professor Dr. Taneja's question also, but I'm not sure I understood all of it. So I'm very open to any further opportunity to discuss and refine my arguments as well as to help policymakers understand how to use it. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Dr. Bagre.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for joining in to all the participants, and thank you, ma'am, for a very, very interesting and question and interaction generating webinar. Thank you once again, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.